Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Carry On Friends, the Caribbean American Experience. I am excited to have Horane on the podcast today. Horane, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. Thank you for the welcome. We can't even talk right now. That's how excited I am to be here, and hoping your audience gets a kick out of this one.
Yeah, man, yeah, man. So, Horane, I think the audience might know where you come from based on your name, but why don't you tell the community of friends a little bit about who you are, Caribbean country you represent,
Yes.
and talk to them about the work you do?
Well, I am Ayadi, Jamaican born and bred. Lived there for quite most of my early years into teenage years, and I migrated to the United States. You asked me what else am I do? So my day job, I work in engineering. I'm an engineering director, specifically software engineering. But on the side, I am a filmmaker, photographer, creative. You know, anything that has to do with media and production. That's where you'll find me. So yeah.
All right. So, the purpose of this conversation is the side part, you know. So talk to me a little bit about media production. Talk
Yep.
to me about why you chose to get into that industry and that business, and some of the work that you've done while
Absolutely.
doing that.
Awesome. Um, so it's quite interesting, right? So growing up in Jamaica, I'm a church boy through and through. I got my start in media in church. I remember my father. He was a sound engineer for this. He had a singing group that who's the manager and the sound engineer for. So I would travel around the entire Jamaica when they go from church to church or concert to concert, and he used to be there rolling out wires, plugging stuff in, walking around with a camera from a very young age. So I just fell in love with it from then, um, and just got really good at doing it from very early on. I'd pick people's brains as like when I see something new that I didn't know about. I'd like so started very young, and then in my professional life, I went to engineering school, but because as an engineer you have a curious mind, right? So I just thought it went well with my production and video and all that other type of stuff. The being a Caribbean, and an immigrant, your parents always say go to school, pick up your book and all these things and get a good job. So being an engineer, that was the pathway to me getting a good job, so to speak. I'm doing air quotes for those who are listening on audio. um, Getting a good job and do that whole thing, because the creative industry was always seen as this place where bounce from place to place. You don't really have a good mechanism or means to make money. But I've always loved being a creative. That is just who I am, a part of who I am. And I just couldn't let go of it, so I do it on the side, along with my day job. Some things that I've done, ooh, um, done a lot of things, but that's not the answer. So very early on, my friend and I, Wentworth Kelly, who's a business partner of mine, we started our company called Ikon Media. At that time, it was called Ikon Graphics, because we were like, all right, cool, we can do some stuff. We used to do web design, graphic design, but our goal was always to make film, always to make film show, always to make movies, because we grew up wanting to tell stories. And through that, it took us quite a few years. We've been doing this for over 15 years now. There's a lot of transitions that we went through. So we went from doing graphic design and web design, to shooting weddings. We started with wedding photography. Then we started doing wedding videos, and then we did both together. And then we elevated to doing films. We did short films with our friends from college, and then on and on and on to just recently we became the first team to have an Oscar qualified film from Jamaica, as well as becoming the first group to have won an African Academy Award. So we've had our ups and downs, working on different series, But everything that we've done so far has been self-funded, and that's also one of the sacrifices that we've made. Is like, hey, a lot of people, they do production to make money. Yes, we do it to make money, but also it's really to make our own content, because there's not enough content, authentic content out there, representing what who we are. So that's something that we hope to fill that void in the space.
Your story represents so many other stories. In a couple episodes ago, someone asked me, like, we were talking about my origin story,
Hmm.
and I said, I got my start in public speaking in church.
Yeah.
When, I grew up in church, and you have Sunday school
Yeah.
anniversary, all these things, you had to go up and recite poem or Bible verse. And so church was really and continues to be a breeding ground for creative folks. Because if you
Hmm.
think of a lot of people in the Black creative community, they got their start in
In
church
church. Yep.
singing, right? So church really is that place where you're nurturing or skills. And I just love this idea of you wanting to tell our stories, and that's cultural, right?
Yeah.
Every child in the Caribbean knows how to tell a
The
story.
story. Oh,
Rainfall, you know, if you tell a
yeah.
story, that's our language of communication,
Yeah.
right? Even if something happened down the road, that's an entire story. So me stand up over here, son. This and is just those are
Even given directions, like I
yes,
know y'all have seen these videos. Somebody said, "Oh, you go around this, you see one shot down this, you make a left, you make a right, you go up." It's all a part of us.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I love that. So congratulations to you and your team for
Thank
making
you.
the Oscar qualified film from Jamaica, and then also to your African Academy Award. So tell me about those films. We're going to get to the self funding and how the money part and all of that. That is the
Yeah.
story for everybody. But I want to center the work
Yeah.
and the work that got you this accolade.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the project that led to these honors.
Yeah, absolutely. So the film is called Raw Materials. It's about a kid who grows up in this community. He grows up in a very rural community, but also rough and tumble, because it's like the ghetto. And he loves fashion, and you put a guy who loves fashion in a ghetto, and you already know the stereotypes that come out around that from our diaspora, right? So so he grows up in this community. His father is an abusive alcoholic, um, and his father can't pay the rent, so they're on the verge of getting kicked out. And the kid is going through a hard time trying to find himself, love himself, because he loves fashion. Everybody around him thinks he's gay, but dude is literally just a lover of fashion, trying to find himself as he goes along without the pressure of people like, yo, like woman and all them things. So that's what the story centered around. We don't overtly talk about it, but it talks about mental health, um, traumas that people face in those situations, because it's very traumatic. There's a scene in the film where the kids went to go give money to the pastor to drop off them ties to the pastor. And there's also part of this too, stereotypical, where the pastor's wife is trying to come on to him and stuff like that. But he's walking back from the pastor's house, and he gets attacked by gang members, and the money's stolen. So it's a lot of those things where we touch on. We weren't afraid to touch on anything in that film, but we told a cohesive story.
Wonderful. And so this might get to my next topic. So where can people see that film?
So currently, it is still on the film festival circuit. We have one more festival that we potentially get into. So it's not publicly available yet, because it did so well. Kudos to the team again, everybody that worked on this film. It did so well. Like, it came out September 2022. Yeah. Oh my goodness, it's been over a year. And we just kept getting accepted to film festival after film festival, so we couldn't really put it out publicly because that's one of the things with film festivals. Like, you have to keep it in certain places, but hopefully it'll be in a place that we could be. It'll be public soon. Hopefully, if we'll see what happens with these film festivals.
All right. So that answer still leads me to where I want to go. So
Hmm.
one of the things that I feel that is important to discuss, right? So in social media, everybody's like, why we can't have more Caribbean, Jamaican, whatever flavor you
Yeah.
want, right? Movies, etc. So we have one flavor where for most people is like trailer on TV coming soon,
Hmm.
big booming voice, this in theaters, or maybe something on streaming. And here you are telling us another story where you're like, we're going through the festival circuit.
Yeah.
So explain to the audience
Yeah.
these two different paths that a film
Yeah.
takes and the difference between the two and the importance of
Hmm.
why
Hmm.
why I feel most Caribbean folks their film goes to the festival route,
Yeah.
and with the exception of the one by the big man himself coming
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
soon, that's the
Yeah.
different animal, but
Yeah.
for the most part most seems to go to the festival route.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us why that is the case, the difference between the two and
Absolutely.
why that's the case?
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's a very good question, and I think for those who are not as versed in the film space, um, they may have those questions. So one, funding is a big thing, and with funding, I mean that in the most general sense. So production funding, but then also marketing and distribution. That's a big part of the pie or of the puzzle that a lot of people don't know about. I want to say distribution and marketing. So distribution means getting your film out there for the masses to see so that you could get a return from it, right? And the marketing of that as well. You talked about seeing a trailer on TV or a radio commercial or seeing posters around. There are whole campaigns around that. So the the I wouldn't say easiest because I'll dig into this a little bit more. The more accessible is the right word. The more accessible way for people to get their films out there for people to see um, is film festivals, right? However, you have to be careful and be very selective about what film festivals you apply to, because that also in and of itself is expensive. So, 2 years in a row, we spend quite a bit of money. So with raw material, we spent about 2,000 US dollars on submission fees alone, just for film festivals. The year before, we had two other films that were in film festivals as well. We spent about $500-600 on those, but it also costs you to submit to these festivals, right? Um, and the reason I say that is not every festival is created equally in the sense of the awards that you get from it, but also the selection criteria and knowing the pool. So you have to do some research in terms of the festival side of things. Theatrical distribution, that's a whole other ball game because 9 times out of 10, as an independent filmmaker, you will not get your films distributed without having an agent, signing a contract with a distribution company. And there's so many layers to how the film industry works. So, yes, film festival route is more accessible to the regular person, me and you. Um, and the bigger distributions, you're going to have to need a studio behind you or a big distribution company. Another thing that has been eh, coming up is YouTube. But also you got to put like a lot of work to make YouTube work for you. So we've done YouTube and the film festival circuit. Haven't quite cracked the code yet on getting a studio behind us, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about that too, of how difficult that in and of itself is. So hopefully that answers what you were asking.
Yes, it does. So, Orin, thanks for giving us that explanation about the film circuit
Yeah,
and also theatrical releases. So, how do I thought I was gonna hold this to the end, but really, money talk, and everything else work
yeah,
follow right behind. So, talk to us or educate us about what it takes to get funding for. I know this doesn't just impact Caribbean folks,
yeah,
right? But we're a Caribbean
yeah.
audience. what impacts us from our creative works by people like you being seen by the entire Caribbean diaspora in the US, or getting more people to see it?
Yeah.
What stops that from happening?
Honestly, I haven't cracked the code yet. And this is something that we're struggling with now. Very transparent moment here. So we've reached the epitome of what we could do by ourselves. Like everything that we've done has been self-funded, like sacrifices, all that type of stuff. But you can only go so far with doing it by yourself. So perfect example. The next time you watch TV, folks, look at the credits. So the big most times in the beginning opening credits, you'll see this production with this person or that person, this production. There are multiple people that pitch in to make a film, right? There's no one, even on the big theatrical releases, there's no one studio who's funding it. It's a combination of folks. And that's where we're at right now. And I haven't cracked the code to that yet. I've talked to many people, even independent filmmakers here in the US. Like they have a hard time. A lot of times, what they do is they crowdsource or they crowdfund. But even that, it's not a all right. I'm gonna start a crowdfunding campaign and get the money in 6 months. There are people I know. One of my coworkers actually, it took her 10 years to get the funding for her film, right? And for me, I don't think that's sustainable. So what I'm trying to figure out, and if you have thoughts around this too, is where are the people who are willing to support, um, who have money, who are willing to support Caribbean filmmakers? Because personally, I haven't cracked that code. Oh my God, I've done countless pitch decks, gone to people, producers, to try to get funding. It's something like they're not really there. But but here's the thing though, and this is a very very big piece of it for that I think is important, is our local governments in the Caribbean need to start supporting. If there's one thing that I love about Canada, Canada is very very big on supporting the creative industry, specifically film, and they have a lot of grants and tax incentives that the Canadian government gives to filmmakers, right? So if there's one place that really really embodies like giving people money, it's Canada. But you have to be in that system to get there. And I know Europe is there as well. But again, we're talking about the Caribbean diaspora, and what our story, how we need to support our stories. Like there's not really much coming out of the Caribbean in terms of financial support or even the ecosystems to create that.
You have hit the nail on the head. And it is something that I've experienced. So, a couple, boy, time fly. We're in
Yeah,
2024. So, last year, 2022, maybe, I don't remember.
yeah,
I was in the Black Ambition program and I had to figure out how I was going to raise some money. So, I tried the crowdfunding and it didn't really work. And to your point, crowdfunding takes a lot of time.
yeah.
People get suspicious of it because there's a scamming culture behind it, so people can't decipher whether this is a scam or whatever.
Hmm.
And to your point, our industries are mature, but the investment into those industries are not mature. They are lacking.
Yeah,
And I think it goes back to the value that is placed on the creative industry. It is not it is not seen, and I think the way it's valuated, they're using the same way to evaluate other industries with the creative industries. You can't evaluate them the same way. But also, I feel like this is going to be like a multi-day conference just to have
Conversation.
this conversation. But all right, let me reel it back in. Audience, let me reel it back in because let me tell you, say, Orion, touch the button
The nerve.
because
Yeah.
that is exactly what's happening. You know, there's no businesses
Yep.
advertising on this podcast. Um, the value, it's always looking at the immediate returns. It's
Hmm.
like the thought processes are just very different, and you don't find corporate support the same way, and
Ooh,
that is the
girl.
number one challenge. the
Oh my
num
goodness.
the number
You
one.
just
But
ooh.
I can say this, as the young people say, I'm standing on business. Yeah,
Business.
business, not business. Business, as I could say, make you get a Oscar eye. Everybody and their mother go say he's a Jamaican, yes. And in my head, I'm like, yo, why you never support the thing when the man when they struggle with him, bridging them, I grow on the place, I try to the thing. That is the problem that I have. And you can celebrate people, but I feel like, yo, it comes back to, you're in tech, right? Yo,
Hmm.
where are the early adopters in the thing? Everybody's a wagonist. You're like, we need people to come back, like help build the wagon. You understand what I say?
Yo, you are we all we need is an organ right now because you are preaching, girl. Like,
Eh, you know?
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and and so that is, I see it. And this is why I feel like I said to you before we hit record, like I feel this unction that we have to bring light to this thing.
yeah.
You cannot have people on social media saying that we need this, but businesses are not supporting. And the thing is, real talk, if we do get investors who are not of the culture, and they might, what we do is we might have to make some compromises, because they'd be like, well, I don't want to see it finished this way or that way. And that's the real deal. You might have
Yes,
to make some cuts. And then the audience gonna say, me never like that. Me say, well, the person who pay for it, Ray. You understand? And so, audience, we're may I get excited. I'm not complaining, but I need you all to understand the real deal of
yep.
what is happening. It's not for lack of trying. You have Orane and you have plenty other people out there trying to create content that reflect us, that our stories are about us, but it's not as easy.
It's
You
not
know,
easy.
it's not as easy to just go juke something up on YouTube and think say, well, if a YouTube ads are gonna run through it. You can make some money from YouTube ads, but it's not a lot to cover production costs,
Yep.
right? Even editing a podcast costs a lot of money, you know? So money is important. The other thing I want to talk about is how are they valuing the size of the audience? How do they determine that value to say, all right, we're
Hmm.
going to invest in this? Because from where we sit, everybody wants to be Caribbean. Everybody
Hmm.
want to be Jamaican.
Hmm.
You go up on TikTok, how much Jamaican dance?
Hmm.
Everybody raving a flag. Everybody doing
Hmm.
something Caribbean. But I know that when I look out, the Caribbean is often lumped up in Latin America
Mecca, correct.
or North America, general, depending on what it is.
Yep.
So, and we know Latin America is mostly Spanish
Spanish
speaking.
speaking. Yep.
So, how can we accurately value not only the Caribbean audience, but lovers of Caribbean culture, because
Yep.
that's also the audience. And
Yep.
and and are they looking at the region? Are they looking at the world? Because the region is one place, but the rest of the world, there's the diaspora is huge. So how what are the conversations people tell you when you're like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure the audience wants this.
Yo, it's so crazy because this question um, floats over into my day job as well because I work for I work for one of the large entertainment companies who has multiple streaming services, and the way that the Caribbean is grouped together when you look at the map of how they target the content, it's actually grouped with Latin America. So the numbers get skewed. Um, this is also another challenge, right? Is our diaspora again speaking for Jamaica, like we have 3.1 million. The last time I checked, around there, 3.1 or 3.2 million was a census of people living in Jamaica, and you have that same number of people living outside of Jamaica, right? And I'm sure it's probably similar for other islands as well. However, the lovers of the culture are much bigger. Europe, for example, is such a huge market in terms of reggae music, um, dance culture. You go down to Japan. Japan is heavily influenced by Jamaican or dance hall culture, right? So I don't know if the marketers have really understood that value, and that's something that I think, whenever we do get the opportunity, those of us who do make it into those spaces, which again, we're touching on something else that is near and dear to me, is I know it's all taboo, I know, but DEI and representation in those rooms is very important, because then you can have people like us who can break that down and translate that for the powers that be, to say, hey, you're looking at this not the correct way. Here's how you look at this market data, and break it down. So it's a combination of things. You need the representation, but then you also need advocates who will actually understand how the culture works.
I mean, whole heap of things, and me not even gonna touch on that because I know I'm gonna go down one next river and go like it just
Yeah,
I'm just gonna glass over it.
yeah,
What I will say, backing up to what you said about Canada supporting its
yeah,
artists and why TIFF is such a big thing,
yeah,
you know, I feel like the UK has the best output of content
yeah,
around Caribbean
yep,
culture.
yep,
They have their output is ridiculous. I keep talking about Desmond's,
yep,
and I was talking to White Yachty a couple episodes ago and a few other people. And I mean, I grew up in Jamaica watching Desmond's,
yep,
right? And then that's a British program. I mean, if you
yep.
tell me that, sorry, whenever all the Jamaicans come on the podcast, me just go down in the patois somewhere.
Listen. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
The audience gets it, but sometimes I have to wheel it back. I mean, for the US and culture and the Caribbean diaspora, we can't have an American sitcom surrounding a Caribbean community. I was telling someone the other day that I was watching Kim's Convenience, which is
yeah.
based in Toronto,
Toronto.
and
Yeah,
it's around a Korean family, and they have all these characters that come
yeah,
in that's representative to a way of Toronto and
yep.
how diverse it is. But the UK's output is ridiculous. We could think of
Absolutely
Desmond's,
insane.
we think of Small Acts, we
Yep.
think of all these other things that come out of the UK, and the US has I understand a much larger entertainment
Mm-hmm.
system, but our output is nowhere near that. Three Bird, all of these stuff that is coming out of the UK. Why you think that's the case?
I think it goes back to one, having the execs in the places that make those connections, right? Um, it's very interesting. Something you said a couple minutes ago, where the person who pays for it has the final say, and we don't have anybody in the US who's willing to put up money back, or so far. Hopefully one day there will be, because it's not for lack of stories. There's nobody who's yet putting money behind series or films like that, outside again of, you know the Bob Marley story, which is going to come out. But that's really the only thing that somebody's willing to take a chance on, and the Marley family had to go in on that too. So it's like the barrier to entry is super high. And again, there's no marketing behind it too. So from a US standpoint, I don't know what um I don't know what it's going to take, because these execs are not willing to give it a chance. Eh, what I would see, what I'd hope for though, is, again, if the diaspora could come together and do what Nollywood did. Shirley Ralph So I saw her. We were at Essence Fest early this year for the film festival, and she came by. She did a panel right before I did one with Storm and a couple other folks, and she talked about, when she was growing up in the industry and in Jamaica, she was trying to push the industry forward, and Nollywood, the African film industry was, started around the same time the Caribbean film industry started, and then they just leapfrogged us, whereas we're still stunted in growth. So I think that's what it's going to take, is somebody to really invest in Caribbean stories. We got to come together, and it also can't just be one person doing a story every 10 years, because that's not sustainable. And I think from a purely business standpoint, that's why we haven't seen it yet, because nobody's put the money behind it to create a pipeline of stuff.
You said something and I was going to ask about it. Um, so you talked about Nollywood, right?
Yeah,
Um, I'm making some notes.
yeah,
So let me go back. So one of the things that I noticed, right? I think there was a period where we had some things going on. So we had it, albeit spread out,
yeah,
but I could talk about it. We had Third World Cup. They were all
yeah.
gangster show, but it's better than nothing,
Nothing.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
We had Shutters
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, Dancehall Queen.
Queen. Yep.
Before that, Lunatic, which
Yep.
I absolutely love with Paul Campbell, right? And what I realized that the minute we went to streaming, the output dropped because all those are DVDs.
Yep.
And granted, maybe people when they burn them illegally, whatever, that
Yeah.
that people were watching them. And so with streaming, it felt like there was a drop off. And there's a few reasons for that. Because it's streaming, it's now splintered. You can watch it any and anyway,
Yeah.
right? That's one. Or two, the barrier to entry is questionable. I don't know where I'm going to stream this. So with all these different outputs, you see a lot of Nollywood type film. Like when I go into my streaming service, if I click on some of them, I can tell that they're from
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria or
Yeah.
African.
Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. So my question is, what is the opportunity to leverage like a Roku channel or all these other things, all these different ways? Um, I'm not endorsing one over the other. Me just
Yeah. Yeah.
use them for the context of this conversation.
Make it be
Pluto,
known.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Me just make it clear. Me not, but this is what I see and this is what I
Yeah.
hear people use. So OTT over the television platforms that are popping up, how can we leverage that? Or is that something to be leveraged, or it just as difficult to get onto these things?
So, great question. And I'll give my unbiased opinion. Truly unbiased opinion. There's so many of them out there that, yes, you could get onto them, but what really is your end goal? Is it eyeballs? Is it just to say, oh, I'm on a streaming service? Because you could get on any streaming service you want, really, because there's so many of them. The proliferation of those have caused a watering down of the market, right? Because you want to go where the masses are, where the eyeballs are, and that's why the larger streaming services have, kind of that concentration. Personally, again, because we don't, as a diaspora or as Jamaican or whatever, like, oh, because our film industry and film outputs are so small. Like there's no aggregator who's going to come and say, hey, I want to buy 10 shows from you or something like that. Whereas in Nigeria, Africa, they're outputting hundreds per year. So they have that mass market that they could pull from. And that's ultimately one of the things that's holding us back, is because there's not the level of output as well as the quality.
One of the things that I want to sidebar on this, because I love talk to you because I've watched, you know, w- growing up, I noticed Jamaica was used to film on location for different films, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it my
Hey,
observation or
hey,
why you
trouble
laugh?
there, trouble
No,
there.
me just ask. It's just no, it's just an observation. Is it me or has that dropped significantly where Jamaica is not um they're not scouting Jamaica as a place where people go film stuff, or I don't know, because I think that also helps to build an industry, because then you need people, or they could be bringing people come instead of using local talent. So tell me what's happening down
Ooh,
there as much
girl.
as you can.
Ooh, girl. Lord Jesus, I
Me
hope
touch a button, me touch.
none of my friend them no crucify me. But all right, a couple things, and this is one of the big ones that annoys the mess out of me. Jamaica refuses to create a tax incentive for people to shoot there. So you know what's been happening, right? People are going to Dominican Republic, Barbados, and these other countries that have. And sorry, I'm not yelling at people, so I'm gonna put it on my hand. They're going to these countries that have these tax incentives, and they're shooting those places as Jamaica, right? So there's only been in the past couple years, maybe 4 or 5 projects that have gone there that have actually shot Jamaica for Jamaica on location. But other projects, they're using other places to shoot because, again, we talked about earlier, there's no incentive to these production companies. Like, I'm not going to want to pay full price for a production when I can get the tax break in another location and still kind of get the same scenes, right? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is for the ones that do go into Jamaica, right? They bring people in. So the locals are working as third or fourth line, you know, on these productions. Very rarely do you have a local who is going to get even a second AD position. You're probably getting a third AD or fourth AD position, and a PA position way down the line. So that also plays into it. Granted, it still brings jobs to the island, which is I am super grateful for. People get to work, but if we had created a more robust industry, robust ecosystem around it, it'd be way better, and we'd have our own people telling our own stories again.
Yeah, back up a little bit and explain to the people then what is AD and PA, please. Me
Oh,
know.
sorry. So, an assistant director or production assistant, there are different roles on the film set, right? But an assistant director, or a second assistant director, they're pretty important on the set. They help to manage the set, and that's what I'm talking about. If we had our own productions and telling our own stories and having a big output of that, we would be the directors, the cinematographers, the assistant directors. So that's what I'm talking about.
Yes, it goes back to what we are saying, right? We're just so reactive,
Yep.
like, it wasn't until 2008 with Beijing that Jamaica capitalized sports as tourism, right? As an industry, right? And we should have been doing that from the Queen Merlene
Yes.
Ati, been
Hmm.
doing our thing, right? And we've seen what happens when other locations incentivize film, because I mean, when I first came to this country, you're going to LA. Now you're going to Georgia,
Hmm.
and I've seen that, that transformation.
Yeah.
So it is possible, but it goes back, right? If everyone is, tourism is important, but tourism also cannot be sustainable long term because of the environmental impacts that it has
Yeah.
on an island. So we have to, who are the visionaries who are thinking about what does this mean for our culture and the extension or the continuation of our culture, because I hope we don't feel like, oh, we're Jamaican beaches, it will be around forever. We may not. Other
Yeah.
cultures are
Are ascending.
slowly,
Yeah.
are pass we out. Yes, and we're not head of the pack as we
Yeah.
think we are, or we're not
Hopefully we
that.
reach that back of the class. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, so I mean, I said, but these are the things that I see, and I'm just so grateful for this conversation, because I know there's like, in order for people to understand what is happening, these conversations give a window
Yeah.
into why aren't we seeing more of ourselves? It is hard, and it starts with the country. I had a guest maybe 2 years ago who talked about how Korea, South Korea particularly, prioritize K-pop to make K-pop the way it is, right?
And look at
So
what's happening right now.
exactly, it is all possible. What are we doing
Yeah.
to make our cultural exports in terms of the arts, make that central to the strategy of the region and then to the diaspora? And quite honestly, maybe this is another conversation with somebody in some other thing, but I'm just throwing it out there. A diaspora is separate from the country,
Yes.
right?
Very
It's
much so.
very separate.
Yep.
So, as a diaspora, do we need the home country to do this before we mobilize and do a thing? It's always a question I'm asking because I feel like as a diaspora, we're always in a wait and see, right? We give deference to the country
Yep.
and we should, right? But we live here, so
Yeah.
there's certain things that the government there cannot do here because of basic diplomatic
Yeah.
protocols,
Yeah.
right? So what are we in the diaspora doing and what role do we play that we don't necessarily, maybe we lead the way as opposed to waiting on the country to lead away?
I love that thought. And again, I think this is where your podcast may be a catalyst for something like that, because then you could be that catalyst to connect those of us in this diaspora, in the industry, who have a passion like this to do something, right? One of the challenges in the diaspora is that because we're so spread out, right, we don't all know each other. um so maybe, I don't know if there's a I haven't found one, like a film connection for Jamaican diaspora folks to say, hey, who's interested in like coming together and making something happen, you know what I mean? um and personally, I've tried to reach out to Shirley Ralph to just like float ideas. Obviously, she's busy, but hopefully one day, she'll see a message, and because I know she has it. Like she spoke it when you were at Essence. It's like she has a passion on her heart for doing something for that. So hopefully, those who are in the ranks and you know made it more than we have so far start making that connection, and then we all just come together and make something happen. Because again, like I know their resource, like collectively, I know the resources are there. So we just need to make it happen.
Man, I love this conversation, and we'll do some of it offline and whatever. But I mean, even talking about Shirley Ralph,
Yeah.
um, in another podcast I did with my friend Michaela Style and Vibes, we talked about how wonderful Cheryl and her brother, because her brother was in a few episodes of A Different World,
Yeah.
right? And I said her character on Abbott Elementary, I think is the perfect character because we know it,
Yeah.
like when you get her upset, the little
The
come out
thing
a
come
little
out.
out, and then she
Yo,
draw
oh
it
my
back
god.
in.
I like there I think I still have it on my phone. Like I felt so proud. There was an episode of Abbott where she got so annoyed where she broke out into patois. And I'm like, thank you. Like this is so amazing to see, on international TV where this is embraced. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah, and
awesome.
I think it is important because I feel like other characters are like caricatures of who we are, whereas Shirley at work in Abbott Elementary represents us. Like
Yep.
I'm going to work and I'm like this,
Yep.
but get on my nerves or let Horane call me at work. You go hear me talking
Right?
Jamaican on the phone,
Yeah.
and that was I feel so proud
Yeah.
of her and the work she's always done to represent Jamaica, always done that. But that character, I just love it.
Yeah.
That character and the other character I'm talking about, Randall's wife on This Is Us. I think it's a good juxtaposition of like a Caribbean born
Oh,
person
yeah.
here, right? You
Yeah.
may not be able to speak
Yeah. Yeah.
the accent the same way, but you have that
But
aspect of the
you're
culture.
raised, yeah,
Yes.
in your household like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And then another one I think is Grace Byers' character. When she read the girl in the first season,
Ah,
I was just like, yes, yes,
yo,
yes.
that's crazy.
And so this is why I feel like deep down, like my love of watching all things TV, documentary, music
Yep.
video is is like I see these representations and I light up, and I just love where the potential of what we can do be more on screen. But
Hmm.
we I have to like galvanize, mobilize, and educate the audience that it's not as easy. But if we, we put pressure where pressure forget
Yep.
put, and we know where the pressure forget put, and we support the filmmakers when they are doing
Support,
crowdfunding. Yeah,
support. That's where it's at.
yeah.
You gotta support.
You gotta support them when they have to do crowdfunding. I mean, everybody love Issa Rae. Issa Rae did have a crowdfund for the money before she got on HBO.
Yeah, exactly.
So, crowdfunding is really, and we understand people are, have been burned by sketchy crowdfunds. But from what I understand, some people, when they, I mean, you may not do this, but I remember one year I was supporting someone and their they used a platform that was backed by another platform
Hmm.
to support like the tax free, whatever.
Yep.
So there are
Yep.
different ways that these creators are using to raise funds. So, audience, please support, please support. I will make sure that I put Orain's iconic media or icon media. I'm iconic because I'm have a conversation with you. May I tell you? And as I continue the series on people in film, streaming, TV, whatever, the goal is particularly for this year, because like I said to Orain, like I feel it on my heart, particularly
Hmm.
for 2024. This is like a
This
high
is the year.
priority. Yeah, this is that year. And so I am so glad. You're my friend now, I don't know if you
Yo,
know this
we're
now.
connected.
Me and your friend.
Trust me, like, yo, of kindred spirits, yo. Inseparable from now on.
All right, you heard it here first. Me
Yeah,
and
here
Orin,
first.
inseparable. So, why don't you tell the community of friends where they could find Icon Media on
Yeah.
the internet and how to support the work you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on YouTube. If you go into YouTube and just type Icon Media and Films, so it's IKON Media and Films, you'll find us the blue logo, blue and black logo. We have a couple of our films up there and a mini series we actually did in COVID lockdown, which was a guerrilla film school type of production because we did that series with only 5 people, which was crazy. We're on Instagram, Icon Media JA, at Icon Media JA, and again, it's IKON. And our website is iconmediaja.com. So IKONMEDIAJA.com.
All right, there you have it, folks. And as I love to say at the end of every episode, walk good.